morning, everyone. This is Bremster, and today I'm coming to you with a scripted solve of my puzzle grid dancing. Now, this is going to be a puzzle record that I'm going to put into my vault, which means it will get released at some point in the future when I need a puzzle to fill a gap. So I'm not sure when you will see this, so I have no news information to give you, except for possibly this could be a solve that has interesting things happen to it, because at the moment I have COVID. I'm supposed to be on holidays and instead I am home very, very sick. So yes, this is going to be a fully scripted solve where I follow a path that I have worked out. I would normally try and keep this in my head, but at the moment I'm not thinking clearly enough for that. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons, even though I'm sick, rather than putting it off. One of which is I've had quite a few people recommend that I submit this puzzle to CTC because they thought it was very good. The rating on Logic Masters Germany of this puzzle was very high. I normally don't do hard puzzles, and this is a very hard puzzle. I have been I've been told I should submit it. I'm going to be not as clear today as I normally am. My head feels like it's full of cotton wool. So because of the recommendations, I wanted to record this so I could post it and use this video also as my solution guide for my submission to CTC. When you see this video, I hope you enjoy the puzzle. This has been on Logic Masters Germany for a while, and yeah, it has been rated pretty well there as of time of recording. So yeah, this will be, as I said, a scripted solve. So you will not see me solving this one on screen, but you will see the solution path if you want to go through it. This is possibly the hardest puzzle I've ever created, but yeah, people seem to really like this one. So I will do my best at explaining both what I had in mind when I created the puzzle and how you can get unstuck if you get stuck, particularly at the beginning. The break into this one, I have been told, is particularly brutal. So let's go through the puzzle. So there's only two rules in this one. Normal Sudoku rules apply. So in every box, in every row, and in every column, the digits 1 to 9 must be placed without repetition. And killer cages. And the way killer cages work is the digits that are placed in cages, if you sum them up, they will total the number in the top left corner of the cage. Digits cannot repeat within cages, so while by normal Sudoku rules these could both be sixes, according to killer rules this is not possible because that would be a repeat of digits within a cage, and that does not work. That's all the rules for this puzzle. So let's give this a shot. So the thing that I wanted people to realize fairly quickly is none of these cages on their own are particularly useful. There's no real given cages apart from this 28 in the middle, which all that tells you is there's no 8 or 9 in this cage, because 28 in 7 is just 1 through 7. Everything else is fairly limited. So what the solver would need to do is look at set equivalence theory, or set, which is where you can look at different sets of 1 to 9 and find their equivalences. Set equivalence theory. So these boxes, were deliberately placed to try and make people think of a well-known set and give you a starting point. And if you play around with different sets, the set that you would hopefully find to start with, where you could start finding things to compare with, is those 4 columns. So if you start with those 4 columns, that is the first set that you will need for this puzzle. And what you're then trying to do is you are trying to find another set of 1s to 9s that will allow you to then eliminate crossovers to be able to apply some pressure on particular cells. So what do we have here? We have 4 sets of the digits 1 to 9. So we know that within these blue cells, there will be, in the final solved grid, there will be 4 1s, 4 2s, 4 3s, 4 4s, 4 5s, because we've highlighted 4 columns and each column will contain the digits 1 to 9 without repetition. So what we can then do is we can highlight rows. And in this puzzle, what we're trying to do is you could play around with different options, but these 3 rows in particular are the ones that will give you some information. Because if you highlight those 3 rows, you notice that you're highlighting cages that are not in blue, and you are highlighting cells, double highlighting cells that are. And why is this important? Because if you were to think about this, what we've done now is these cells are both in blue and yellow, which means that, pardon me, which means that if you think about those equivalent sets, so the digits 1 to 9 existing in both, then if you were to remove a digit from blue and yellow, then the fact that you've removed it from both means that they maintain the same equivalence. So this is 3 sets of the digits from 1 to 9. So there's an extra set of the digits 1 to 9 in blue, and this is 4 sets of digits 1 to 9. But if we were to move, say, this digit, let's say it was a 3, from blue and yellow, then they still have the same equivalence. Then yellow would be 3 1s, 3 2s, 2 3s, all the way through to 9, 3 4s, 3 5s, and blue would be the same, just minus a 3. So anything that is both blue and yellow you can remove, and you still have the same equivalence because you've removed the same digit from both sets. And what we have now is that blue and yellow are the same, except blue has an extra set of the digits from 1 to 9. Now, this doesn't look particularly useful. You can do some math on this and figure some stuff out, but the real trick to this puzzle is realizing now, because of this 28 cage, what you have is you have these cells that aren't included in anything, but these blue cells can easily be eliminated if you pick all of this up in yellow. So if you pick up box 5 in yellow, it means that this center cell here is double counted because it was already yellow and I've added blue into yellow into box 5 again. So this is now being counted twice in yellow, but these cells here are now in both blue and yellow, and I can remove them. And now this 28 cage is completely in yellow. And what I've got now is I have blue and yellow are an equivalent set. So there's no extra set of 1 to 9 in blue anymore. And this allows you to do some math and figure something out, because what I've got is I've got 4 cages in blue, which leave 4 cells unaccounted for, and every cell in yellow is in a cage, but that cell is double counted. So I can do some math. If I do some math on blue, and I add 23, and I'm using my calculator for this, 16, 25, and 23, that totals to 87. So what I know is the cages in blue sum to 87, and that leaves those 4 cells out. Now, if I sum up yellow, I have, on the left, I have 12, 11, and 11. And I need to enter this correctly. I'm actually would try and do this a bit more in my head, but more recently, but I'm really not thinking clearly. The middle cage is 28. And then on the right, I've got 9, 7, and 8. Now, if I add all of those together, I end up with 86. So what I end up with is the fact that these 4 cells plus 87 is the equivalent of that cell plus 86. Now what that means is this cell is 1 higher than all of those cells. And that's incredibly important. And the reason that's incredibly important is because, sorry, I'm marking things off as I'm doing them in my as I said, this is a scripted solve. The reason that is incredibly important is if you think about this cell here having to be higher than those, this is a 28 cage. So the maximum I can put into a 28 cage is a 7. But these see each other. So this has a minimum of 1 and 2. This has a minimum of 1 and 2. So if I add 1 and 2 together, I get 3. Add 1 and 2 together, I get 3. They have a minimum of 6. This has a maximum of 7, which gives me the exact difference I need in order to make the math work. So this must be a 7, and these must be 1 and 2. Anything else, pardon me, breaks the mathematics required for these cages to have the set not work. And I admit that can be a tricky to find set, but I was hoping that the initial columns plus these horizontal cages would allow people to find that. So we now have 1 and 2 completely taken in row 4 and in row 6. They can't go in these cells either because the boxes are taken, so this becomes a 1-2 pair. And that means that there's a couple of things you can do. So the next thing you can do, of course, is you can candidate mark row 5. Without 1 and 2, a 7 cage must be a 3-4. An 11 cage without 1, 2, 3, 4 must be 5, 6, and that just leaves 8, 9 for the row. In here, a 7 cage with a 1 or a 2 must be a 5 or a 6. A 10 cage with a 1 or a 2 must be an 8 or a 9. These, we know that this is 1 through 7, so these are 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the digits that are missing are 1, 2, 8, and 9. And that gives us the markings for the columns and gives us some initial pencil marks to work with for the rest of the puzzle. Now, at this point is where people would often make a mistake with this puzzle. And what they would do is they say, I'm done with the set. And they would just highlight it and get rid of it. And that will cause a lot of problems further on because the set isn't just used for the break-in for this puzzle. You must keep using the equivalencies of the set all the way through the solve of this puzzle. And that's by design. Because what you realize now is that in yellow at the moment, we've got a single 1 and 2. And yet in blue, we've got 2 1s, 2 2s already. So we need to place at least one more 1 and one more 2 into yellow. But it's more tricky than that. If we do not place a 1 or a 2 in the 16 cage, then this would be 3, 4, 5, and 6. And 3, 4, 5, 6 sums to 18. And 18 is higher than 16. So you must use at least a 1 or a 2 in a 16 cage. So we've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it can't go in there, 1s and 2s to place in yellow. And yet we've only placed 2 so far. So we must place 3 more 1s and 2s somewhere in yellow. You cannot place a 1 or a 2 in a 12 cage. Cannot be done. You cannot place, so in these 3 cages, you've got to place 3 1s and 2s. Now, you can't place them in the same cage because that would need a 3 cage. And you cannot place a 1 in an 11 cage because it would need to go with the 10. So because you must place a 1 or a 2 in each of these cages, this must be a 2, 9. There is no other way of fitting a 1 or a 2 in there. If I don't put a 2 in here, then I've got to fit 3 1s and 2s into those 2 cages, and it's just not going to work. Once I put a 2 in here, I can't hide a 2 in here, but it must contain a 1 or a 2, so that becomes a 1, 7. And then, pardon me for a second. Oh, pardon me. And then this 9 cage now must contain a 1 or a 2. So it's either going to be 1, 8 or 2, 7. But this cannot be 2, 7. And the reason it cannot be 2, 7 is a little bit hidden. If we were to put 2, 7 in here, then the 7, the question you need to ask yourself is where would 7 go in column 7? If 2, 7 was here, lining up with the 7 here, 7 could not go in those 3 cells because the 7 is already placed. 7 could not go in those 3 cells because the 7 is already placed. So 7 would have to go in here, and it can't do it. The other way to look at that, of course, is where does 7 go in column 7 already? Can't go down here because that's 1, 7. Can't go down here. 7 is already having to be placed in one of those. I cannot put 2, 7 in there. So that becomes 1, 8. And now I've got my 5 ones and twos that I need for this. And what I have left over is a 1. So the extra thing I have 3 ones and 2 twos. So the extra thing that I can put into the 16 cage is a 1. It can't go in here, so the 1 must go into there. That 1 looks down, making that a 2, which makes that a 1. Oh, excuse me for a second. I am just going to pause. Okay, sorry about that. So the next thing you can look at is where does 2 go in row 3? So you can't put a 2 in a 12 cage. That's what caused all of this stuff to start. You can't put 2 in either of those cells because of the 1-2 pairs looking up. That can't be a 2 because of the 2 in the column. Can't put a 2 in either of those cells, so you can place a 2 in row 3. So now you can look at this 12 cage. So the 12 cage now can either be 3, 9, it can't be 4, 8, or it can be 5, 7. Now, and here's where an extra trick comes in, again, using the fact that these blue cages must be equivalent to the yellow cages. So what we want to do now is you want to look at the options, and as I said, I use a killer calculator for this. I've got a spreadsheet that I set up years ago for this, and a lot of people do. You can do this in your head, but it's completely up to you how you wish to do this. But what you want to do is realize that in these cages now, there is no option for using a 1 or a 2, because if you do, then you would need to find a home for another 1 or 2 in yellow, and you just can't do it. There is no place to put another 1 or 2. So any option that uses a 1 or a 2 in the 23s or the 25 cages can disappear from your list of possible solutions. And once you've done that, you realize that every single one of these cages must use an 8 or a 9. But when you look at yellow, you can't put an 8 or a 9 in here or in any of those. But I've got 3 cages that needs 8s or 9s. I've got an 8 here, I've got a 9 here. If I make this 5, 7, I don't have enough 8s and 9s to fill those cages. It doesn't work. So this can't be 5, 7 without breaking the blue cages. So this becomes 3, 9, which takes 3 out of there. This one, and I should have done this earlier, the one that gets placed in here takes 1 out of here. This 2 takes 2 out of here. So this becomes 8, 9, which takes 8, 9 out of here. I have been forgetting my basic Sudoku, and I apologize for that. And that also is an important thing, because what I just explained was that each of these cages must take an 8 or a 9 if it doesn't have a 1 or a 2 in it. And that's just the options that are available to those cages. But there is nowhere I can put a 9 into this 23 cage. I cannot put a 9 because 9s are fully taken up in those boxes. So this must take the 8, and I've only got 1 8 in yellow. None of these are 8s. I've got 1 8 that will be placed in yellow. So the 8 will go into this 23 cage, and I can't put it in those 2 because it's already taken. So there will be an 8 in one of those 2 cells, which is the only 8 that will go into blue. So what I know now is the 23 cage will have an 8, and any other cage that would possibly take an 8 cannot do so. So I can remove any 8 option from any other cage. And that is quite restrictive. Sorry, I'm... Okay. So these now, because as I said, each of these must take an 8 or a 9, and I just said I've now got two 9s that I can play with. The 8, of course, looks down, making that a 9, which makes that an 8. These now must take 9s. They cannot take, pardon me, they cannot take 8s because I've used the only 8 I've got. Cannot put a 9 into those two cells because it's already taken in the box, so 9 goes in here. Cannot put 9 in here anymore because I just put a pair of 9s in there, so those become 9s. Now, here is possibly one of the trickiest but most fun parts of the puzzle, in my opinion. 8 is now in a pointing pair in box 1, looking down, taking up 8 in column 3. So where can 8 go in box 7? We know it can't go in any of those cells, and it's not in the 2, 9. So it's got to go down here. So, can 8 go in the 12 cage? And the answer is no. And the reason for that is, if 8 goes in a 12 cage, it needs another 4. And the only way to do that is with 1 and 3. And that looks initially possible because neither 1 or 3 are placed at the moment. However, if I put a 3 into this 12 cage, the question we need to ask ourselves is, where does 3 go in column 3? Because we would be knocking 3 out of those cells. 3 is already knocked out of those cells, and you cannot put 3 in there. So there would be no 3 to be able to be placed into column 3 at all. So if you put 8 into the 12 cage, that doesn't work. So you cannot put 8 into those 3 cells, 8 cannot go there, and because of the pointing 8s, 8 cannot go there, so you can place an 8 there. And this is where the title of the puzzle comes from. Now we can do what is now I call the grid dance, because what we have now is we can use the fact that each row, column and box of a Sudoku uses the digits 1 to 9, and those digits sum to 45. So this is 2 rows of a Sudoku grid, which means they will sum to 90. And we can do some math here, because what we have here is 12 plus 8 is 20, plus 25. This is 3. This is 23. This is 15, and I'm using my calculator again. I could normally do this in my head, but I'm not going to. And that sums to 86. So all of these cells here sum to 86. We know that all of the cells, including that one, sum to 90, so that's a 4. So now we can continue that in columns 8 to 9. So this is 19 plus 8 is 27. This is 45 minus those cells, which is 11. 45 minus 11 is 34. This is 9 and 17, which is 26. So I'm trying to do some math in my head. That means that they sum to 87. So this leftover cell here must be a 3. And then we can dance around the grid again. This is 20 plus 16 is, I'm actually going to do this on the calculator, 36. 17 and 23, I believe that sums to 40. And then we've got another 12. No, I can't even type. Which sums to 88. So the leftover cell is a 2. And that grid dance where you can just, once you get this 8, you can immediately get this 4, this 3, and this 2 is definitely one of the tricks that I love the most about this puzzle. Once you get the 3 and the 4, you can put in that 3 and the 4. Once you get the 2, you can put in the 9 and the 2. Once you get the 9, you can get the 3 and the 9. And you start resolving some stuff around the grid, and that provides some information. And I need to pause again, excuse me, for 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so once we've got these digits resolved, we can actually look at these 12 cages and realize that because 1 is knocked out of all of those, 1 is forced into these 12 cages, which means that the other two digits in those cages must sum to 11. And if we look up here, if we look at the options, because 2, 3, 8, and 9, or in this case 2, 8, and 9 are not available, and up here 2, 3, and 9 are not available, the only options that are available are 1, 4, 7 or 1, 5, 6. And they must be different, because if they were the same, if these were both 147 or 156, then whatever they were would have to go in here, and that doesn't work. If this was 147 and this was 147, this would have to be 147, and it's not. So these must be 147 and 156, and they must be different. So that's just something that's worth noting. Now, the next thing, of course, to see is that these 2s mean that 2 has to be placed over here. There's a 3 here. There's a 2 looking up here. So this is a 2. And these now must sum to 15. 15 can be done as either 8, 7, which I can't use. So this is 6, 9. This 6, 9 resolves this 8 and this 9. This now is a triple, which is 4, 5, and 7. And this now is a triple, which is 3, 6, and 9, and that cannot be a 9. This 8 is looking across to here, which means that's not the 8, and the 8 must be here because one of these two had to be an 8 because I needed the 8 in the 23 cage. And now this has become a lot more restricted. And I'm probably going to need some assistance from my calculator on this one because, wow, COVID is bad. So I've either got 4, 5 in here, which sums to 9, which means these would have to sum to 7, which would be 1, 6. So 1, 6 is possible. If this was 4, 7, these would sum to 11. These would have to sum to 5, but I couldn't use 2, 3, and I couldn't use 1, 5. So I couldn't use 1, 4 because I used the 4 over here. So I can't use 4, 7. So there must be a 5 in here. And if I use 5, 7, this would sum to 12, which means these would have to sum to 4, which means they would be 1, 3. So there is a 1 in here, and it's either 1, 3 or 1, 6. So there must be a 5 in here. Now, here is where a little bit of a trick comes in, and this is something that you can either pick up by looking at a killer cage calculator, which is how I did it, or you can do it by understanding killer cages better than I do. If you look at the options that are left in this 23 cage, then you absolutely must use a 5 in it. With all of the options that have been removed, not being able to use a 1 or a 2, having to use an 8, the only options that are left for that 23 cage are 3, 5, 7, 8 or 4, 5, 6, 8, either of which require a 5. Now, once you've forced a 5 into this cage, as well as there needing to be a 5 in this cage because of the options that we just found out that were required, that is 2 5s that have been used in blue. We have a 5 that is here and a 5 that is here, which means that I have matched my equivalence of 5s in yellow and blue. I cannot use a 5 down here in this 25 or 23 cage without needing to find another 5 in yellow, and I don't have one. So every option for this 25 and 23 cage that uses a 5 goes away. And that forces these to be single options. So this K23 cage is now only 3, 4, 7, 9, which means there's no 6 in it, and that is 4, 7. So that is 3, 4, 7, 9. This becomes a 6. And this must be 3, 6, 7, 9. And that was something, there's no 9 in there. And there's no 7 in there because that's a 4, 7 pair. So the 7 is in there. So that becomes completely forced by the fact that using this set that we set up in the beginning, we only have two fives available, and I have to use one of them in here, and I have to use one of them in here. And again, I need to pause. I'm so sorry about this. Okay, so now we can look, and there's only three digits that have not been placed down here, which are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 5, and 8. Unfortunately, if you add 2, 5, and 8, you end up with 15, which is what we're looking for. 8 can't be in those cells, so that becomes the 8. There is a 2 up here looking down, making that 5 and that 2. That 8 looks up, making that 1, and that becomes the 8. The 1 looks down, making that 7, and that becomes the 1. So that gives us this. These are 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's not 4 or 7, so this is a 5 or a 6. There is no 7 in there because of the 7 down here. So this actually becomes a 7, and there is no 7 in there. This is 4, 5, which sums to 9. So these need to sum to 7. So this is not 1, 3. This is 1, 6. This is 5. There is no 5 in those. So the other thing that is quite important is we just placed a 7 in here. And if you remember a few minutes ago, I think it was a few minutes ago for you, I did mention that these 12 cages were forced to either be 156 or 147, and they had to be different, but I can't make this 147 anymore because the 7 in the box is over here. So this becomes 156, and this one becomes 147. But the 147 here means that that can't be a 4 because that has to be 147. So that's the 6 and that's the 4, and I can take 4 out of all of those. This digit is now known to be the 5 because that's all that's left in the box. And that 6 takes 6 out of those. That is 3, 7, which sums to 10. So these need to sum to 15. So of course there's no 3 in there. I could have done that by just removing the duplicate option. This 6, 9 looks up, making that a 5. And now I can resolve these cages. 5 plus 2. That makes this the 1. And then 1 plus 9. There's no 5 in there. This 2 makes that the 1, which makes that the 2. This 5 looks over, making that 4 and that 5. This is where I start running out of my solution guide, I think, because I got to the point where so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, and 7, which is of course resolved. That is 7, that is 3. That takes 7 out of there, which puts 7 into there. This 1, 4 looks over, making this 6 and this 1, which I could have used the 6, 9 for. This is now a known pair, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 3, 8. Oh, that 5 is taking 5 out of there. That's a 3, 6 pair, so that is 8. I'm not doing this as cleverly as I'd like. 1, 2, 3, that's got to be a 4. This is now known. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's an 8, which means that's a 3 and that's a 5. This is now known. 1, 2, 3, 4. That 4 is looking over, making that 7 and that 4, which makes that 3 and that 7. The 3 makes that 9 and that 3. The 9 makes that 6 and that 9. The 2 makes that 1 and that 2. This is no longer 1 or 5. That's 6, so there's no 6 in here. This is a 1, 5. Where to look next? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are 6, 7, and 9. There is no 9 in there, so that's the 9. That 7 makes that 6 and that 7. The 6 looks up, making that 9 and that 6. That 6 looks over, making that 3 and that 6. This is now missing 3 and 7. The 7 looks down, making that 3 and that 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8. That 8 makes that 4 and that 8, which makes that 1 and that 4. The 1 makes that 5 and that 1, and the 5 makes that 6 and that 5. And that is how you do grid dancing. I had the feedback I received on this puzzle was phenomenally good, but I do admit this is an incredibly hard puzzle. The continued use of the equivalence on these sets, and the fact that you need to keep realizing, hang on, I've run out of digits, particularly the ones with the fives, I think is very hard to see. And I've watched a couple of people solve this on camera, and they've found the initial break-in with the 1, 2, 7s, and they've immediately unhighlighted the set saying, I'm done. The set is used. And at that point, they've completely been lost and have been unable to progress. So I hope you found that one interesting. And yes, I hope you enjoyed the puzzle, whether you attempted it or not. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I try not to do too many scripted solves, but because of the way I'm using this video, I kind of needed to. I'm also not thinking particularly clearly. So thank you everyone for watching, and good luck with your solving.